Chapter 18. Wills. Kitab al-Wasaya. Chapter 1054. What has been related about what is commanded about the will. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, the Messenger of Allah, as saying, "It is the duty of a Muslim man who has something which is to be given as bequest not to have it for 2 nights without having his will written regarding it." Great Sahih. Narrated Aisha, the Messenger of Allah did not leave dinars, dirhams, camels and goats, nor did he leave will for anything. Great Sahih. Chapter 1055. What has been related regarding what is allowed for a testor to give from his wealth. Narrated Amir B. Saad. On the authority of his father, Saad b Abi Waqas, when he, Saad, fell ill at Mecca, according to the version of Ibn Abi Khalaf, then the agreed version has which brought him near to death. The Messenger of Allah went to visit him. He said, "Messenger of Allah, I have a large amount of property, and my daughter is my only heir. May I give 2/3 of my property as a sadaqah, charity?" He said, "No." He asked, "Then a half?" He replied, "No." He asked, "Then 1/3? He replied, "You may will away 1/3, and 1/3 is a lot. To leave your heirs rich is better than to leave them poor, begging from people. You will not spend anything seeking thereby to please Allah without being rewarded for it, even the mouthful you give your wife." I said, "Messenger of Allah, shall I be left behind for immigration to Medina?" He said, "If you remain behind after me and do good works seeking the pleasure of Allah, your rank will be raised and degree increased. Perhaps you will not remain behind, and some people will benefit from you and others will be harmed by you." He then said, "O Allah, complete the immigration of my companions and do not turn them back." But miserable was Saad b Kavla. The Messenger of Allah lamented on him as he died at Mecca. Great Sahih. 1056. Chapter 1056. What has been related about it being disliked to cause harm with the will. Narrated Abu Huraira. A man asked the Messenger of Allah, "Messenger of Allah, which sadaqah, charity, is the best?" He replied, "The best sadaqah is that you give something as sadaqah, charity, when you are healthy, greedy, expect survival and fear poverty, and not that you postpone it until your death, and then you say, for so and so is such and such, and for so and so is such and such, while it was already for so and so." Great Sahih. Narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. The Prophet said, "A man giving a dirham as sadaqah, charity, during his life is better than giving 100 dirhams as sadaqah, charity, at the moment of his death. Great Da'if. Narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, a man or a woman acts in obedience to Allah for 60 years. Then when they are about to die, they are cause injury by their will, so they must go to hell. Then Abu Huraira recited, after a legacy which you bequeath, or a debt causing no injury, that will be the mighty success. Abu Dawud said, Al-Ashad bi Jabir is the grandfather of Nasr bi Ali. Great Da'if. Chapter 1057. What has been related about accepting the position of executing a will. Narrated Abu Dar. The Messenger of Allah said to me, Abu Dar, I see you weak, and I like for you what I like for myself. Do not be a leader of two persons, and do not be a guardian of an orphan. Abu Dawud said, this has been narrated only by the people of Egypt. Great Sahih. Chapter 1058. What has been related about abrogating the will for the parents and near relatives. Narrated Ibn Abbas. The Quranic verse goes, it is prescribed when death approaches any of you, if he leaves any goods, that he may bequeath to parents and next to kin. The bequest was made in this way until the verse of inheritance repealed it. Great Hassan Sahih. Chapter 1059. What has been related about willing to an heir. Narrated Abu Huraira. I heard the Messenger of Allah say, Allah has appointed for everyone who has a right what is due to him, and no bequest must be made to an heir. Great Hassan Sahih. Chapter 1060. Mixing one's food with the food of an orphan. Narrated Abdullah ibn Abbas. When Allah Most High revealed the verses, come not nigh to the orphan's property except to improve it, and those who unjustly eat up the property of orphans, everyone who had an orphan with him went and separated his food from his orphan's food, and his drink from his drink, and began to detain the remaining food which he, the orphan himself, ate or spoiled. This fell heavy on them, and they mentioned this to the Messenger of Allah. So Allah Most High revealed the verse, they ask thee concerning orphans, say, the best thing to do is what is for their good. If ye mix their affairs with yours, they are your brethren. And then they mixed their food with his food, and their drink with his drink. Great Hassan. Chapter 1061. What has been related about what is allowed for the guardian of the orphan to take from his wealth. Narrated Ahmed b. Suhaib. On his father's authority, said that his grandfather told that a man came to the Prophet and said, I am poor, I have nothing with me, and I have an orphan, he said, use the property of your orphan without spending it lavishly, hurrying and taking it as your own property. Great Hassan Sahih. Chapter 1062. What has been related about when one ceases being an orphan. Narrated Ali ibn Abu Talib. I memorized a tradition from the Messenger of Allah. There is no orphanhood after puberty, and there is no silence for the whole day till the night. Great Sahih. Chapter 1063. What has been related about the severity of consuming the wealth of an orphan. Narrated Abu Huraira. The Messenger of Allah as saying, refrain from 7 characteristics which cause destruction. He was asked, what are they, Messenger of Allah? He replied, to assign partner to Allah, magic, to kill a soul, man, which is prohibited by Allah except for which is due, to take usury, to consume the property of an orphan, to retreat on the day of the battle, and to slander chaste woman, indiscreet but believing. Abu Dawud said, the name Abu al-Gait is Salim, client of Ibn Muti. Great Sahih. Umair, a companion of the Prophet, said, a man asked him, the Prophet, Messenger of Allah, what are the grave sins? He replied, they are 9. He then mentioned the tradition to the same effect. This version adds, and disobedience to the Muslim parents, and to violate the sacred house, your Qibla, direction of prayer, in your life and after death. Great Hassan. Chapter 1064. What has been related of evidence that the shroud is from one's wealth. Narrated Kabab. Musab bi Umar was killed at the Battle of Uhud, and for him only a coarse cloth would be found as shroud. When we covered his head, his feet showed, and when we covered his feet, his head showed. So the Messenger of Allah said, cover his head with it, cloth, and put some rushes over his feet. Great Sahih. Chapter 1065. What has been related about a man who gives a gift, then it is bequeathed to him, or he inherits it. Narrated Buraidah. A woman came to the Messenger of Allah and said, I donated my slave girl to my mother, but she died and left the slave girl. He said, your reward became due, and she came back to you in inheritance. She said she died while a month's fasting was due from her. Would it be sufficient or be taken as completed if I fast on her behalf? He said, yes. She said, she also did not perform Hajj. Would it be sufficient or be taken completed if I perform Hajj on her behalf? He said, yes. Great Sahih. Chapter 1066. What has been related about a man who institutes an endowment. Narrated Ibn Umar. Umar got some land in Khaybar and went to the Prophet and said, I have acquired land in Khaybar which I consider to be more valuable than any I have acquired. So what do you command me to do with it? He replied, if you wish, you may make the property as inalienable possession and give its produce as sadaqah, charity. So Umar gave it as a sadaqah, declaring that the property must not be sold, given away, or inherited, and gave its produce as sadaqah to be devoted to poor relatives, the emancipation of slaves, Allah's path, travelers. The narrator Bisr added, and guests. Then the agreed version goes, no sin being committed by the one who administers it if he eats something from it in a reasonable manner, or gives something to a friend who does not make his own property. The narrator Bisr added, provided he is not storing up goods for himself. Great Sahih. Narrated Yahya b. Sa'id. Abd al-Hamid b. Abd Allah b. Abd Allah b. Umar b. al-Khattab copied to me a document about the religious endowment Waqf made by Umar b. al-Khattab. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful, this is what Allah's servant Umar has written about Tamq. He narrated the tradition like the one transmitted by Nafi. He added, provided he is not storing up goods for himself, the surplus fruit will be devoted to the beggar and the deprived. He then went on with the tradition, saying, if the man in charge of Tamq wishes to buy a slave for his work for its fruits by selling them, he may do so. Mu'ikib penned it, and Abd Allah b. al-Arkam witnessed it. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful, this is what Allah's servant Umar, commander of faithful, directed in case of some incident happens to him, yet he dies, that Tamq Sirma b. al-Aqwa, the servant who is there, the 100 shares in the land of Kaibir, the servant who is there, and the 100 seers which Muhammad had donated to me in the valley nearly, will remain in the custody of Hafsa during her life. Then the men of opinion from her family will be in charge of these endowments, that these will neither be sold nor purchased. Spending its produce where they think necessary, on the beggar, deprived, and relatives. There is no harm to the one in charge of this endowment if he eats himself or feeds or buys slaves with it. Chapter 1067. What has been related about giving charity on behalf of the deceased. Narrated Abu Hurairah. The Messenger of Allah has saying, when a man dies, his action discontinues from him except three things, namely perpetual sadaqah, charity, or the knowledge by which benefit is acquired, or a pious child who prays for him. Great Sahih. Chapter 1068. What has been related about giving in charity for one who died without leaving a will. Narrated Aisha, Ummul Muminin, A woman said, Messenger of Allah, my mother suddenly died. If it had not happened, she would have given sadaqah, charity, and donated something. Will it suffice if I give sadaqah on her behalf? The Prophet said, yes, give sadaqah on her behalf. Great Sahih. Narrated Ibn Abbas, a man said, Messenger of Allah, my mother has died. Will it benefit her if I give sadaqah on her behalf? He said, yes. He said, I have a garden, and I call you to witness that I have given it as sadaqah on her behalf. Great Sahih. Chapter 1069. What has been related about the will of a combatant disbeliever who dies, and his executor accepts Islam, does he have to carry out the will? Narrated Ahmed B. Suhaib. On his father's authority, said that his grandfather told that Al-As ibn Wa'il left his will that 100 slaves should be emancipated on his behalf. His son Hisham emancipated 50 slaves, and his son Amr intended to emancipate the remaining 50 on his behalf. But he said, I should ask first the Messenger of Allah. He therefore came to the Prophet and said, Messenger of Allah, my father left in his will that 100 slaves should be emancipated on his behalf. And Hisham has emancipated 50 on his behalf, and 50 remain. Shall I emancipate them on his behalf? The Messenger of Allah said, had he been a Muslim and you had emancipated slaves on his behalf, or given sadaqah on his behalf, or performed the pilgrimage, that would have reached him. Great Hassan. Chapter 1070. What has been related about a man who dies and leaves behind a debt, and he has what will fulfill the debt. The creditors will be asked to defer repayment for a while, and the heirs should be treated with leniency. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah that his father died and left a debt of 30 wasks of a Jew on him. Jabir asked him to defer, but he refused. Jabir then spoke to the Messenger of Allah, asking him to mediate to him on his behalf. The Messenger of Allah came to the Jew and spoke to him about taking fruit dates. In lieu of the debt that was on him, but he refused. The Messenger of Allah asked him to defer the debt to him, but he refused. He then narrated the rest of the tradition. Great Sahih.